Okay, so what we are looking at is the very basics of Google Workspace. If your school were to say, like, okay, we have not been using Google and we're going Google, and you're like, I've never used Google stuff, what should we tell somebody to help get them started? What are the basics of Google? And I'm going to explain what I even mean by that. We're Google Workspace. So first of all, let's talk about the word workspace. That is pretty brand new. In the last, what feels like month, they rebranded. It's probably been more than a month, but not much more. They've rebranded from G Suite to Google Workspace. Now, I've never been a fan of using G Suite, so I'm kind of happy that they changed it. But, in life, you just got to get used to new things, and getting used to new things is just new. And it feels weird to say Google Workspace right now, but pretty soon it will just be my new norm. And by then, I'm sure they'll rebrand it again. And so that would be my first basic to learn about Google Apps would be they're always adapting and changing and updating and getting rid of stuff that you like. And we just are always becoming like lifelong learners. When you are a technology user, not just Google, you are forced to be a lifelong learner. Any day that I open up my Gmail or anything, the interface could look different. There's new features, there's features that I'm used to having and they don't have anymore. So the only thing you can choose is your attitude. And I choose to be excited about change and getting to learn new things. Okay, so what I have done is I have shared a Google form. Now, what's really crazy is, I started doing Google Apps trainings. Gosh, I became a Google Certified Innovator, which at the time they called it something else, but Google Certified Innovator in 2011. And so, which means I was using Google Apps before then. And when I was doing trainings back in 2010, 2011, I was literally teaching people what is a browser, what's a URL, and all of those really basic things. And I don't even mention that. And so my presentation today is not the presentation I would have given 10 years ago. Even if you are brand new to Google Apps, I know you at least have some familiarity. Like, this is a Google form. And I'm going to put that in the chat. Link to the Google form. You should use Google Forms. If you're a Google Apps user, you should totally make this part of your regular practice. Is I make forms that I get information from people, and I'm able to see everybody's responses all at once. But this isn't new to anybody. Even if you've not been a Google Apps user, you have seen a Google form. And even if you're not a Google Docs user, I know you've seen a Google Doc. So I'm not going to get down to that basic of a level, but saying, okay, now that you're actually using it, what does that look like? So if you would, for those of you who are live with me right now, fill out this Google form with what you think basic tips are, things that a new user should know. And I've actually coded this. This is one of the things I think is really cool about Google Apps Workspace is it is codable. So if you did learn some JavaScript and you learned what's called Google Apps Script, you can make your Google Docs, your Google Sheets, your Google Slides, your Google Forms do more. Like, why can't I? Maybe you can if you can code it. So that's obviously not a basic concept, but I think it's nice to know that the possibility is out there. And so when you fill out this form, automatically your answer becomes my slides. So I have this Google Slides. It's like PowerPoint, and except it's Google, which means it is fully in the cloud, and I'm able to share this with you. So I am displaying and showing in presentation mode my Google Slides, but I was able to take the link to this and put it into the chat so you all can see my slides at the same time. So unlike a PowerPoint file, an old school PowerPoint file where I would maybe email you or put on a floppy disk my PowerPoint, if I make edits to my Google Slides, your link that you're like seeing my Google Slides will automatically update instantly. I would not have to resend it to you. So that to me is one of the biggest reasons I like to use Google Workspace is the fact that I'm able to collaborate so much more easily that whatever I do, you get the updates and it's not this back and forth of file sharing. So Google Workspace, you can see that this is their new logo. It's got the Google font and the workspace. And then we'd talk about icons. And so looking on here, you see this yellow one on the left is Google Slides. It's like PowerPoint. We say slides, it's a slides presentation. I'm using Google Slides. This is a slides presentation. So again, like PowerPoint, but not. Right below that, the green one is Google Sheets. Those are spreadsheets. That's like Excel, except it's the Google version. And with both of these, and all of these actually, they live fully in the cloud. They are not something that you can download to your computer. You access them through, I use the Chrome browser, and actually the Microsoft Edge browser, the Chromium, is pretty awesome, and I think you should consider installing it. It is basically Google Chrome, but better. In the upper right is this purple icon, is the Google Forms, is the best thing since sliced bread. And Google Forms, you should use it all of the time whenever you want to get information from multiple people. Now, Kirk has a question, what is the major difference between G Suite and Workspace? And that would be the letters. So Workspace is spelled W-O-R-K-S-P-A-C-E, and G Suite is spelled G space S-U-I-T-E, and that's literally the difference. You're welcome, Kirk. They just rebranded it. That's why you didn't see anything major, is because it's literally just a logo rebrand. So the difference would be, as you see in the center, I have the old icons, which of course I personally prefer because they're really different looking. The Google Drive is the triangle and the Gmail is this red M. And so when I go to look for things, I look for the color, and now they've taken that away from me. And so we'll get into that. So Google Calendar, Google Keep, Google Meet, all of those icons have changed. In the bottom right hand corner, I have Google Classroom. That icon has stayed the same. So all of these are part of Google Workspace, and this is not all of the Google apps. When you say Google Apps, it's applications. So the applications are Gmail, the applications is Google Docs, the applications is Google Slides, the applications is Google Forms. And so these are the Google apps that are a part of Workspace. And so these are the new rebranded icons, which is what I mean is they're not very distinguishable. And so I will often have my Gmail, my Google Calendar, my Google Drive. I don't even know what that fourth icon is for. I think it's just to all encompass represent the idea of Google Docs, Sheets, and Slides, but it's not the Docs, Sheets, or Slides logo. And the last one is Google Meet. So it's pretty common that I have all of those open at the exact same time. As you can imagine, those are the icons that are in my tabs, and I get confused as to which tab I want to click on next because I have to shape recognize rather than color recognize. I'll get used to it. Okay. So Google Drive is the hub. To me, this is the most important thing to understand, is knowing that if you are a Google Apps user, if you are a Google Workspace user, Google Workspace centers around Google Drive. And you get there by going to drive.google.com. So I'm going to go ahead and open a new tab. In the top, I'm going to type drive.google.com. And you see this brings me to my Google Drive, which I'm sure many of you have already seen, but if not, that's how that works. And it is your thumb drive in the cloud. Like, I will not buy my kids thumb drives. If their school supply list says thumb drive, I say, well, you have a Chromebook and you can just save everything. They don't save it to the Chromebook. They do not save to the Chromebook. It saves to Google Drive, which is, if you want to be technical, the cloud's not really a cloud. It's not a mythical place. It is like a cave in Montana. There's somebody's actual hard drive, physical computer space, somewhere buried beneath the world in a secure location that you're saving it all in their computer instead of saving it on your computer, which is fabulous, because what I do all the time is I start making a Google Slides and then, oh, it's time for me to go. I don't touch anything. I just back up, I walk out the door, I get in my car, let's assume my husband's driving. All of these apps, the Google apps, have a app for my phone. So there's a Google Slides app on your phone, there's a Google Docs app on your phone, there is a Google Classroom app on your phone. There is no Google Forms app, which is kind of weird. But you can actually just go to Safari or go to Chrome on your phone and go to forms.google.com, and you can pull up all your forms, and you can edit your forms and do those things just using the browser on your phone. But I get in my car and I'm able to pull up those Google Slides that I had here, and I didn't have to do anything. I literally just kind of like back away and I leave. And so they're synced all the time. In fact, what I was doing when I was making this presentation is I wanted to add some Bitmojis, and the Bitmoji is, I want to do Friendmoji specifically, is on my phone. So I opened up the Google Slides app on my phone, and I'm able to add the picture that's on my phone onto a slide in my presentation, and then right in front of my face, that picture shows up because I'm collaborating with myself. I do that all the time. I have more than one computer. I have a laptop. So if I open up my laptop, I have full confidence that all of my files are going to be there no matter what device I'm on. So one time I was doing a presentation in one state, and then I got in my car and I drove. My next presentation was in a neighboring state. I drove to the next state and I pull up to Cracker Barrel because, you know, I got to have some hash brown casserole. It's a must. And I go to get my laptop out of my backpack and realize I had left my laptop in a completely different state. Well, that's a shame. And I went in and had some hash brown casserole. Now, the Cracker Barrel was in the Walmart parking lot, so I just walked into Walmart, and $200 later, I had an inexpensive Chromebook, and I had all of my files, all my presentations, everything I wanted to use that next day. So then I show up at the school, and wouldn't you know it, they do not have an HDMI hookup. Of course not. So I'm not even able to use this Chromebook that I had just purchased. So they went and found some really old PC. They've been hiding in a closet somewhere. And we got that started up. We updated Chrome, and boom, there's all of my stuff. I'm able to do my presentation on their device. So this is one of my main reasons that I'm very staunchly Google Apps, is because I don't want to have files that I'm like, oh, it's on my computer at home. Like, no, if I'm a Google Apps user, all of my files are in Google Drive. They're in what's called the cloud, and I can access them from anywhere, including your devices. So long as I can get on the internet, I am able to access my files. Any country, even China, even though they technically try to block Google Apps, you can use a VPN and get around that. Yes, Lauren, the admin icon did change as well, and I just gave some of the basic ones. Most of you would not use the admin panel. So admin.google.com, the admin icon is for the person who's managing the Google Workspace at your school, and that's usually just one person that has access to that. Sometimes you have more people, but definitely not everybody. So I won't cover that today because it's not something basic. Any questions about the cloud? Okay. And feel free to jump in and ask questions.
What would you say to someone who said they don't, they have concerns about big data company having all their information? How do you respond to someone like that?
Well, they have all your information anyway. You have to make that decision. It is a decision that you are storing your things on their devices and a certain level of trust that they're not accessing them. Now, technically, all of the files are encrypted on this computer in a cave in Montana. I don't know if they're in Montana. They're somewhere. And on these computer servers. So technically, Google employees cannot read and look at your files. I mean, of course, that's because they coded it that way. They can always uncode it. What do you got, Kristen?
Is it really on somebody's hard drive, all of our stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that must be some hard drive.
It's a giant building, bigger than your school, bigger than Walmart, bigger than, I mean, it's just like the world's biggest computer, if you want to overly simplify it. It's just a giant hard drive, and everybody's stuff is being saved there instead of being saved to your computer. So, wow. Kirk, pick your poison. I think every single one of us has lost our thumb drive. So,
they get dirt. They get like dirt in them, and they don't work.
Right. I've run over in my car. You drop it in the snow. At least where it's on the cloud, I can go access. If something happens to my computer, if my computer gets stolen, I don't lose my files. So which is the bigger concern is whether or not Google has all your stuff, which by the way, you can download all of your data. They do give you that ability that you can do that. Not that I do, I don't. Where would I store it? It's a lot of gigabytes that I have up there. And so if my computer were to crash, if my computer would be stolen, if I were to lose my thumb drive, I have no recourse. Where it's possible that there could be some solar flare that causes the entire wipeout of Google servers that wipes out all of your stuff. I'm pretty sure they have redundancy, so it should be they have a computers in a cave in Montana, and they also have some data center in Mexico that it's double there. So if there's a tornado or a flood or something at one data center, there should be a backup of all of your data. I'm not going to pretend that I know that. Interesting, Lauren. Lauren says this is actually an invention by someone in Israel. And of course, Lauren is in Israel right now. So that's a fun fact. Thank you. And she says the original name was disk on key. But I think memory stick, I think it goes by a lot of names. So by being a Google Apps user, you're going to get rid of all that. It's really kind of a hard thing to wrap your brain around, that you're no longer going to download stuff to your computer. When you attach, there's no attachments. It's actually just linking it. Everything is in Drive and it stays in Drive. You do not take it out of Drive. It is possible to download them when you download Google Docs, Sheets, Slides, when you download the Google Apps. They actually download as Office. They download as PowerPoint, Word, Excel, other file types, because they don't exist. They just do not exist outside of the cloud. They don't. Okay. In Google Drive, you go to drive.google.com. It is your storage. It's like a lot of floppy disks. It's like a lot of memory sticks. And you can make folders and you just put everything in there. It is exactly a hard drive, right? I can put FileMaker files. I could put Photoshop files. I can put photos, PDFs. If you can put it on a memory stick, you can put it in Google Drive. Now, whether or not you can view it, like what am I going to do with a Photoshop file? If I try to launch it from Google Drive, it has to have an application that opens it. So while I can just treat Google Drive as my thumb drive, if you are going to try and have a file that opens up not on the browser, not in the web, you would have to re-download it and open it up in the application. I try to, as much as possible, just keep all my stuff on the web for the reasons that I already outlined, is I want to be able to open up any computer, including my phone, and access all of my stuff all of the time. So that's me. But again, you can make folders, you can store them in folders, and I put the folders in quotations because there's a lot of paradigm shifts and things that you have to do when you become a cloud user. The idea of a folder is folders don't really exist, and you don't really need to know this. It looks like a folder. I'm gonna go over here to my drive. You can see I have some what looks like folders. They're actually just labels. So each document gets labeled, and then when I click on any of these folders, it finds any files that have that label. So it looks like they're in the folder. It's a construct. It really doesn't matter. Go ahead and think about it like files, file folders. Lauren, which term are you not familiar with?
Oh, the DODDS?
I'll type the response.
Okay, so docs, sheets, slides, forms. Google Docs is a text document. Google Sheets is a spreadsheet. Google Slides is a presentation. And I don't have Google Forms on here, but it's a form. And you fill out a form digitally. And the thing is that they automatically save to Google Drive, which is in the cloud, which means I don't need a thumb drive. It doesn't take up space on my computer. And you would find all of those at drive.google.com. So if you open up, like say I put this link in the chat here to my slides. So these are my slides. Up at the top is the link. I copy the link up at the top and I paste this over here. If you open that link, it recognizes that you have opened a Google Doc. And even though you don't save it, and even though you don't make a copy of it, you would be able to locate this in your Google Drive if you wanted to. And it's just linking in there. It just puts a link in there to say, hey, you've referenced this file. Well, this file lives in Google Drive, so it has to be reflective back there in Drive. Now I see I have up here an anonymous kangaroo. So what happened is I took this link at the very top and I pasted the link and I shared it with you, and you were able to join in on my document, and we're able to be in the document at the same time. Now, because I gave you the link and I didn't put your email in, it's like, I don't know who clicked on this link. So they assign you an anonymous animal. Now I have 2 people in this document at the same time. And if you guys would click on a different slide, this is not basic, but I'd like to show you. Basic really is knowing, understanding how your collaborators, people who are on this document at the same time as you, if I click on your little icon, it actually jumps me to where in the presentation you are. So you guys are not on any different slides. Anyone move to a different slide?
I did.
You did?
Yes.
It should. I wonder if it's because it's, I think it's because it's in view. If we were editors, I would jump to where your cursor is. I think because you don't have edit access, you don't have a cursor, so it doesn't give me any place to jump. And so this should be part of my presentation, is I very rarely give view access. Like, just look at this. I usually have some sort of collaboration edit access so that when someone is editing with me, I'm able to see what they're editing and where they are editing it. Okay. There is no save button. That's probably one of the hardest things for new users to get used to. There's no save button. So when I create a Google Doc, when I create a Google Sheets, when I create a Google Slides, even if I don't name it, it just says untitled. Now notice I'm going to come over here. I'm in Google Drive, and at the very top of Google Drive, it says Search in Drive. Now this is your best reason to use Google Drive, if you ask my opinion, is what does Google do best? Search. That's what they do best. So I would expect that the search in Google Drive is amazing, and it is. So if you want to find any of your files, I'm going to type in untitled. If I could spell. I'm going to type in untitled, and it's going to show me all my documents. See, untitled presentation. These are just untitled pictures, untitled spreadsheet, untitled drawing. You're like, Alice, that one doesn't say untitled. And that's right, because when I search in Google Drive, it searches the entire document. It doesn't just search the title, it also searches the content in the document. So if you have created any kind of a Google Doc, you are no longer like, I forgot to save. That's dead. You would just find it in Google Drive. You didn't name it. You're like, I didn't even name it. If you can remember anything you typed in it, you put it into the search up at the top. And in that search, it should, in theory, pull up your document. All right. Yes, teaching the students the difference between save and save as. And so we don't use save as. What we do instead, using being Google Apps users, Workspace users, is we do file, make a copy, and I have a slide for that here in a second, is the save as, splits it apart, and you have a brand new one if you chose to save as a different version. Okay, so there's no save button. The way to create a new Google Apps. Remember, Google Apps refers to Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides. You say a document, it could be a doc, sheets, or slides. It's just the file itself. We say Google Docs shortened when we're talking specifically about the text doc. So you can see here in this little animation, when I go to Google Drive, there's a button that says New. I click New, and it gives me option create new folder, create new Google Doc, a new Google Slides, a new Google Sheets, or a new Google Form. Or under More is where you can create a new Jam and some other file types. So you'll see that blue one there says Google Docs. That's a text doc. If I say Google Document, it could be any of those. There are documents in my Google Drive files. Okay, so the pattern for Google products. The pattern for Google products. And I think it's important to recognize this because our hub is drive.google.com. You should make this your homepage. Like if you open up the internet, it should go to Google Drive. That's where all your stuff is. Pick up where you left off. I, by the way, don't do that, but still good advice. But so how would you find the Google products? So the pattern is maps.google.com takes me to Google Maps. Docs.google.com takes me to a filtered version of Google Drive. So if I go to docs.google.com, this is Google Drive. It doesn't look like Google Drive, but this is Google Drive. This is Google Drive where it only shows you your Google Docs. Why would you do one over the other? Not a really good reason other than this is prettier. Sometimes I can find it faster because I know that I'm going to be looking for a Google Doc that I have. Kimberly, I always have 50 million tabs open all of the time, so I can't give you any advice about that. And it also has the template gallery, so I can start off my Google Doc, not just from a blank template. So, I just think it's pretty, but understand it is Google Drive. Doesn't look like it. It says Docs. It's docs.google.com, but it is indeed Google Drive. Okay, calendar.google.com. Meet.google.com is what we're using right now. It is a video conferencing tool. And if you go to meet.google.com, I'll do that, meet.google.com, you're able to start a new video meeting. So those are that. Slides.google.com, let's take a look. Slides.google.com is a filtered view of Google Slides. Now what you'll notice it shows in here is a bunch of stuff, other people's names. Hi Lauren, there's yours. The people around you are fake people. They're not real people's names. I go to listofrandomnames.com so when I make demonstrations so that I am not using student names in my presentations. But this is the beauty of being a Google Apps Workspace user, is I'm collaborating and I'm interacting with others at the same time. They didn't send me a copy of their presentation. We have the same presentation at the same time. So if they make edits, I see them. If I make edits, they see them, and we keep one document all of the time. Now this is slides.google.com. It is, again, this is Google Drive. This is Google Drive. It's not Google Drive. It's just prettier, and it's filtered for slides. So it's like, why don't you just look at all the slides in your Google Drive? That's what this is. It's Google Drive with slides for your slides. Sheets.google.com, same thing. It's spreadsheets, and it is a filtered view. Sheets.google.com is a filtered view of your Google Drive just for spreadsheets. Forms.google.com, same thing. Forms.google.com. It's Google Drive, filtered for my forms. Now, if I come into my Google Drive, I'm at drive.google.com, I click on New, I can create a new Google form, which you should do often. Google Forms are the best thing since sliced bread. But you can also just go to Google Forms and click on this blank, and it'll create a blank Google Form for you. Both will do the same thing because they're both Google Drive. Okay. Lauren, you can teach them to go to their email first. And so what she is pointing out is if you go to, I don't want to show off my email necessarily, but here in Google Drive, there is this it's 9 dots, 3x3 grid. It is the apps launcher, if you would like the technical word. And in the apps launcher, it shows you apps choices, except every single one of these, right? It says Gmail. You can go to gmail.google.com. It says calendar. You can go to calendar.google.com. It says drive. You can go to drive.google.com. It says docs. You can go to docs.google.com. Take any of these words. Contacts down here in the bottom right. Contacts.google.com will take you to the contacts. So if you know what you're looking for, like I'm looking for Drive, well, by the time you've clicked on the apps launcher and chooser, and then you select slides, I would have already Control-T slides, and you can see what mine's doing. It's trying to give me slides.new, which is, that's not a beginner. That's a little bit more advanced idea. So if you put .new at the end, it makes you a new Google Slides. So I like that. But it remembers it for me. And I can also just click on this slides icon in the slides that I'm in, and it takes me to slides.google.com for that filtered view. So you can use the apps chooser, apps launcher. It's apps chooser. You can use the apps chooser.
I noticed that when you go into one of these apps, like for the website, you get the templates for the first line, on the first line. And then how do you get that if you go through Drive?
Yeah,
How do
great
you get the
question.
templates?
So I'm in Drive and I click the new button. You'll notice these each have an arrow next to them. So the default is a blank document. So if I just click here, it'll create me a blank Google Doc. However, if I go to new and then I hover over the arrow, it gives me the option to do a template.
Oh, that's so simple. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, so I want to piggyback on my friend Lauren's question.
Okay.
So let's say I have the same, like I make a task tracks is what I call them. So all the tasks for my students to do through the week, and they check them off. So how can I make my own template and have the template show up in the templates section?
That is not a beginner question, Kirk.
Okay. I'm sorry. Look. I slapped
No slapping. I would like to, if it's okay with you, is to not get too far from the basics, because what I'd like is anyone watching this video later who really is new to Google Apps, which I know none of you are, that they have the basic information to not be overwhelmed with the extra information. So if you would please submit for a webinar where we look at templates, how to make the templates, how to access the templates, I think that would make a great session.
I'll do a shameless plug for anyone watching. It is totally worth your time and money to be a premium member.
Oh, thank you, Kurt. I appreciate that a lot. Okay, so we did the forms and then contacts.google.com. And I think a lot of people don't know about this one. Every time you have email and you interact with people, they're probably saved in your contacts. So I had previously called this account Fake Alice Keeler, that I just did it for demonstrations. And then I just decided I didn't like all my stuff saying fake. So I went in and I changed my name to PD Alice Keeler for this particular account. The problem is that when I would email myself from my other accounts, they're still loaded up in my contact, in those contacts, as Fake Alice Keeler, and it doesn't change. So you have to go into contacts.google.com and edit that. Now, my school recently, they changed what we call the domain, right? So you have your name at your school's name.com or .org or whatever it is. And that for whatever reason, that domain, that website that defines your school, we decided to use a different one. And so I have a bunch of contacts, like I start to type someone's name and it tries to suggest the old domain. I'm like, and then I accidentally send it to an email that no longer exists. So I had to go into contacts.google.com and I just deleted all of those. I'm like, stop suggesting this to me. It's going to suggest to you what's in contacts.google.com. Now, this is not basic, but I think it's a nice thing to know, is that if you go to contacts.google.com, you can make groups. So if you have like all the math teachers, you can make a math teachers group so that when you send a Gmail email, you just type in math teachers and it populates everybody's email without you remembering, okay, who's in the math department? So that's nice. Now, I love Google Keep. If you are not a Google Keep user, I would highly recommend you become a Google Keep user. It is keep.google.com. This does break the rules that Keep notes do not save to Google Drive. So, but there is a Keep app on your phone. And so if you ever want to just jot down what parking spot you're in, shopping list, it's Post-it notes. And it's just a really great little reminder app. But of course, it's a Google product. So any of these notes, I'm able to share them with others, and we can be using the same notes checkoff list at the same time. Now, Kirk, you might be thinking, I think you just said you have your students check off their tasks for the week. Keep would not be a good way to do that because you're literally editing the same note. So if one student checks it off for everybody. So unless you're letting them choose tasks, who wants this one where you need it to be removed when they check it off? I don't think that that would be the best way to go, but you can leave students feedback in a little Post-it note, the Google Keep, and you can share it with them and they can have that feedback on their accounts. Okay, sites.google.com is a website. So Google Sites websites, they are collaborative like Google Docs, Sheets, and Slides. They do have a version history, although I don't think it's as robust. I haven't really tested it out that much, though, to be honest. So if you wanted to communicate information to a larger group, I use them for student portfolios. I want the students to showcase their work from the semester. You can go to sites.google.com and create a free website that integrates in really nicely with all of your stuff in Google Drive. And this is pretty new, is Jamboard.google.com, and it is a whiteboarding app. So it creates a Google document that is a whiteboard that is collaborative, and it does save in your Google Drive. Now, this is not a beginner tip, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway. So when I come up to Google Drive and I want to find something, I can search up here in the top, right? Remember I typed in untitled, so if I type in chupacabra, and these are all my documents that mention the chupacabra. Okay, but what if I'm like, I don't know what I'm searching for, but I know it was a Google Doc. You'll notice I can click on this little drop-down arrow, which opens the filtering. And it says type. So I can say, hey, show me anything that is a document. Search. And now this is my whole Google Drive for documents. I'm like, well, wait a minute. I know that I made it this week. Okay. So then I come down and I can filter it for modified in the last 7 days. So now I'm going to search my Google Drive for any documents that were recently modified. So that helps me to find my stuff a lot faster. So we're talking about, though, jamboard.google.com. Let's go to jamboard.google.com. And you see it's the same thing like docs.google.com, sheets.google.com, slides.google.com. It is Google Drive, but filtered for Jamboard, which we call a jam. The individual file itself is a jam. I don't know if you can see this plus icon down here in the bottom right. It says new jam. I'm able to create this whiteboard. I can add these sticky notes. So what Jamboard is a collaboration tool. It's a brainstorming tool. When you want to get ideas down, rapid prototyping, I share this with my students. I'm like, what do you think about this? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? What would be the first step that you would do? Jams are great for that brainstorming thinking applications. It also does have a pen option. I ask them to give me an acute triangle. They can draw it. And I can have multiple frames. They call them frames and not pages. And so when I go to Google Drive, you notice on the left-hand side, if I click on recent, there's that jam I just made. You'll notice I did not click save. It just saves to Google Drive, just like I said. But if I'm just hanging out in my drive, where's that jam? How do I find it? And when I go to the top and I'm going to search for it, and I click on the little drop-down triangle, and I go to type, come on, file type, I can do photos, I can do PDFs, I can do Google Docs, Google Spreadsheets, Google Presentations, Google Slides, Forms, audio, drawings, folders, and even Google Sites. Your website saved to Google Drive. Google Keep does not, but the rest of them do. In fact, even Maps save to Google Drive. So Google My Maps saves to Google Drive. But where's Jam? This is obviously an oversight. So this is a little bit advanced tip. If you type in type, : and jam, going to show you all the jams in your Google Drive. It should be there when I just click on the triangle and I go to file type. It should be one of the file types. But like I told you, Jamboard's a relatively new product, so it just has not shown up in the filtering options yet. But you can use type:"jam" to find it. Kirk, you look happy. I'm guessing that you tried that.
Yes, and from a teacher perspective, I'm really big on vocabulary. So whatever vocabulary system, so I'm happy to know some of these official names.
So one of the things that I do is I like to click on the filters, and I like to see what they put up here at the top, and I memorize that. So at some point, for me, it's faster to go not owner : me. So stuff that's not owned by me. Now, I think most of you probably wouldn't do that, where you put a -sign, owner : me, to find stuff that you don't own. And you would just go to the filter and just do owner, not owned by me. But if you pick up on the patterns, it's a way to be a little bit faster at using Google Drive. Just a tip. Okay, back to my slides. So this is where I was saying I was collaborating with myself earlier, as I have the Google Slides presentation app on my phone. Let me pull this up. So you can see on my phone, I have all of the icons. I have Google Slides, Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Photos, Google Drive, and I'm going to go to Google Slides, which is, of course, just Google Slides, but still Google Drive, still Google Drive. And when I open that, I actually have this workspace presentation right on my phone. I'm able to go through all of the slides. Yep, it's hard to do backwards here. But they are all there, and I can actually edit here, and they show up right on my computer, so I collaborate with myself. So what I had done is I'd gone into the Bitmoji app, and this is my friend Alexis. She does Twisted Teaching is her brand, and she likes to work with teachers. She's a teacher coach and helps with a variety of things around teaching, one of which is culturally responsive teaching, CRT. So if that's something that you're interested in, and I hope that we all are, I hope that you will check out Twisted Teaching, my friend Alexis, and she usually gives me a blurb every week for my newsletter. So I went and got into my Bitmoji, and I friend mojied, so her and I are in the same Bitmoji together. And because I use Google Apps for collaboration, right? Why should I not use a thumb drive? Why should I trust the cloud? Because I would rather collaborate with people and have efficient collaboration. And I think you would be hard-pressed to find a better collaboration tool. Now, Microsoft has come a long way. They do a lot of cool things. But Google still does it better, in my opinion. Here's one of my big reasons that I would prefer to use a Google Slides over PowerPoint, even though I really love PowerPoint Slides Designer. It's really amazing. There are a lot of really cool features I really do love about PowerPoint and Microsoft. But that feature where I can still open up PowerPoint on my computer, as soon as I open up on my computer, it locks people out from collaborating with me. That's not how I want to live my life. I want to live my life collaborating and working together. So I have one Google Doc that every week my friend Alexis puts her blurb for my newsletter to help with culturally responsive teaching. And I just open up that Google Doc, I copy it, and I paste it into the newsletter. It's the same Google Doc every week, same Google Doc. So she doesn't email it to me every week. I just open it up and it's there. I've bookmarked it. It's the same one. I know where to go. I know how to find it. With my students, I have one Google Slides. And every day I put a new slide that says, what are we doing today? And it's the same one since August. I just keep adding another slide on there. But they go to the same link every time. They go to the same link, and it's just got the new slide on there. It's updates. I don't want a new file. I want to collaborate with everybody, that we're all on the same page at the same time, all the time, for sure. So we do it for collaboration. So the most important thing to know about Google Apps, in my opinion, besides the fact that Google Drive is your hub, is the share button. So in Google Docs, in Google Slides, in Google Sheets, in that upper right-hand corner, you're going to see this share icon. Google Forms is a little bit different. You can collaborate and share Google Forms. They just don't have this share button. It is a little bit different. But what you notice about this share button, and this one's yellow because it's from Google Slides. In a Google Doc, it would be blue, and in a Google Sheets, it would be green. And it used to be they were all blue, and I was used to saying the blue share button, and now I have to catch myself all the time because now they match the document. But what you want to see is that padlock, and that padlock means that it is private. This is not shared with anybody. Nobody has access to it. So if I take a document and has that padlock icon on the share button, and I copy the link at the top and I share the link, like I email them the link, or I put it on Twitter, or social media, or I put it in the chat here in the Google Meet, they would get a warning. It says, you don't have access to this document. It's not shared with you. And that is by default. And so you have to intentionally click on that button so that you can share it. So when you click on the share button, this screen comes up and it gives you a spot. You can see I've put an arrow here of putting in their email. You type in the email address of the person that you want to collaborate with. So you type in their email and hit done. And that then gives them edit access to your presentation, Google Slides, or your document, Google Docs, or your spreadsheet, Google Sheets. So I see I have a little animation here. I've shared it with my demo account. And you'll notice that when I put in the email, the default is edit access. The default is edit. When I share with someone, I'm sharing that we're going to collaborate. We're going to edit together. This is a paradigm shift. You know, like, don't look at what I did. Work with me. Let's do stuff together. I used to be the secretary for the Faculty Senate. It was like our teachers union. And I would take the notes for the meeting, and then I would take the Word document and I would send it to the president, and I would send it to the vice president for them to say, like, how are my notes? One of them would email me back like, all these things are wrong, change these things. Oh, I got to go search through the Word doc and find those spots to make the edits. That was not fun. I did not enjoy that. And the other one would make a copy of it, and then they would make the edits and send it back to me. Well, this is a hot mess, right? Like, I have my original, I have the one I just updated from the president emailing me, and I have this new file that the vice president sent me, and I have to somehow reconcile the changes. No thanks. And so once Google Docs became a thing, before the meeting, I would create a Google Doc, and I would share it with view access with everybody in the Faculty Senate. So as I typed the notes during the meeting, the people, all 100 people in the room could see what I'm typing as I am typing it. So if I'm not doing something right, they can alert me right then, so I make sure that I have accurate minutes. Now I give the president and the vice president edit access. I'm like, you're an editor. If you find a typo in here, you can be your own secretary. Why don't you just fix it, and then I'm not going to have to do any extra work. Like, my life just became so much better. What? So you do have 3 options when you share it. The default gives them edit access. They get to type on your document. But you can change them to commenter, which you can see is what I'm doing here in this drop-down menu. And so they have comment access. They can leave little notes, but they can't actually alter the document, the spreadsheet, the slides. Or you can just give them view access, like, well, you can look at it, but don't touch it. So those are your different options. So once you click the share button in the upper right-hand corner, it was private. You've typed in at least one person's email. You'll notice that the icon changes. It's no longer a padlock. It's now this people icon. And so it lets you know that it is being shared. So if you go back to that share icon and wait for this to rotate back around, what if I don't know their email? I want to share with people, like, I don't know who's coming to this webinar. So I didn't share it with explicitly typing in your email addresses. I share it so that you can view it or you can edit it, even if I don't know who you are. So what happens is it starts out that it's restricted. That's what that padlock is. Like, only you and anyone whose email you typed up there, it's restricted. Now, if you click down here below, you see where it says change link to Alice Keeler. Now, that Alice Keeler is my school name. If you click on that, you'll notice that the icon changed from being a padlock to being a buildings icon. So it's sharing with anybody at your school. So people at your school can see it. So if I give you the link, you'd be able to see it because you're logged into your school account. If I shared it with somebody outside of my school, they would not be able to see it. So then I click on it one more time to say, no, not just my school, like anyone, parents, anyone. So you'll see here in the animation, I click on change link to Alice Keeler. I click on my school's name and I switch it to anyone with the link. Now in this case, it defaults to viewer. So when I'm saying anybody in the whole world who I don't know who they are, maybe I don't want to give them edit access. So it defaults to view. So it allows them to view your document, to view your slides, to view your spreadsheet. Now you can see there's a little tiny triangle on that viewer. And you go from viewer and you switch it to commenter or editor, that you would give anyone commenting rights or anyone editing rights. And I actually do that quite often, is I give anyone editing rights because I like to collaborate with a lot of people who aren't necessarily in my class or at my school. Now, when you do that, when you have changed it down here at the bottom where it says get link and you change the link, when you do that, the icon changes. And you'll notice now the icon does not have a padlock. Now the icon doesn't have two people. The icon has a link icon letting you know that it's link shared. The people with the link can access this. So be aware and in the know for sure, what are the different share button icons? I'm going to back up. Default is a padlock. If I share it with people where I typed in their email, there's no link icon. And if I've shared it with generically, I'll have a link icon. Any questions or tips? Nope. Okay, so remember, Google Drive is our hub. The hub is Google Drive. And so when I go to drive.google.com, it's going to look something like this, where I can see my files, my documents. And if I right-click on a file, that's when this menu comes up. Now, a lot of these options are available in the toolbar up at the top, but I think the fastest way for me is I just right-click and I can see all of my options as it pertains to that document file. So if I right-click on a document file, the first thing you'll notice, I hope, is the share. I mean, yeah, it says preview and open with up at the top, but most of the time I go to share. And in the same way that I click the share button in the upper right-hand corner that I just showed you, now it's going to pull up that same box. I'm going to pull up this guy, right? But it does it in Drive. So it just allows me to share it either location where I'm actually in the document or if I'm in the Google Drive. In the habit, right-click and choose share and make sure that you are sharing your documents. This is really importantly true for folders. If you have a folder in Google Drive, it is by default private. And if you right-click on the folder and do share, you can share the folder. This is super important, so I'm going to say it again. If you right-click on a folder and choose share, you can share the folder because then anything in the folder is shared. So if I share a folder with Kirk and then I've got private documents that I put into that folder, well, now Kirk has permissions to those documents without me having to put his email in each individual one. Let's say I've got a folder full of like 100 things for the math department, and then we hire a new math teacher. Well, I don't want to open 100 documents and share them with the new math teacher. And then, oh, by the way, the other one left the school, so I have to remove the other teacher. So what I can just do is if I do the sharing permissions on the folder, instead of doing the sharing permissions on the document, if I change the sharing permissions on the folder, it's going to change the sharing permissions for everything in the folder. Yay! So that's really nice. Any questions about that? Yes, any future documents will also be shared. So step 1, make a folder, share it with somebody. Step 2, create documents in the folder. Now, if I open the folder, I'm in Google Drive and I open the folder and then I click the new button, I create a new document or new slides or whatever, it creates it in the folder I'm looking at. So it creates in the folder and it instantly shares it with you. So Kimberly, if I have a folder I've shared with you, I create a Google Doc in the folder. You have the folder open at the same time. As soon as I make it, you'll see it in the folder. You open it and we're in the document at the same time. No communication needed. It's beautiful. So share folders, get in the habit of sharing folders. Then you're like, I don't want this person to have access anymore. You right click on the folder, go to share, remove their access, and you can do that. Now over on the left side, you'll see where it says shared drives. That is not a basic term. So I'm not going to cover shared drives in this webinar, but shared drives is a way to share files with other people at your school. It's just a little more complicated. I'm just not going to get into it. To be honest, I don't use it that much. Just some really good reasons to use it, but let's focus on basics. Share folder, that's the basic. Also, if you right click on a file, you have the option to move to. So if you would like to organize your files so they're not just thrown into a big pot of My Drive, you can move it to a different folder. So you click move to, it takes it out of that folder, puts it in a new folder. Now, more complicated is add a shortcut. And this is new, and I'm still not sure that I fully put my brain around this. All I do know is that it messes up my coding. So the new structure of Google Drive is that a file lives in one folder. It lives in one folder. It has a, if you do a tree, you say, okay, this is the folder it's in, it's labeled this way. Say, but if I'm looking in these other folders, I'd like quick access to it. So let's say I'm in my second period folder and I have some stuff from first period that I might want to use with my second period. And if I'm in my first period or my second period folder, I'd like to get to that file quickly. So I add a shortcut into second period so I can access the file, but it actually lives in the first period file. Does that seem complicated? And it shows as a shortcut icon. It's got a little swoopy on the icon, and instead of just being the regular icon to let you know that it doesn't live here, it actually lives in a different folder. Kind of complicated. So let's stick with the basics are folders, you add it to a folder, you move it to another folder. And when you go to Google Drive, that's drive.google.com, you have this whole left-hand sidebar. It's very important. You have this new button, and the new button lets you create new documents. And then priority is documents that you use a lot. You can create a workspace in there of like a little pinup board, if you'd like, of things that you use frequently so you can get there quicker without having to have a folder, but still having quick access. My Drive is your general Google Drive and all of the folders therein. Shared drives, again, a little more complicated. I'm just going to skip over that. We have Share With Me. My first place to go when I open up Google Drive, I open up Google Drive and I click on Recent on the left-hand side. That is the first thing I do. Now, this drives a lot of people nuts. Like, why is all my student work in there? Got all this other people's stuff in there. This is not a folder. Friends, not a folder. Everything below the line, you see it says Property, My Drive, Shared Drives, and then there's a line. Everything below the line is a pre-created filter. It's a filter, and it's filtered for any documents that were recently edited, whether or not you own them. If you only want documents that you've recently edited, then you're going to do your own filter. So then I come up to Google Drive, and in the search, I click the little drop-down arrow and say, look, I want stuff that's owned by me. I want my docs, my files. I want them to be owned by me. And then I come down and that were modified in the last 7 days. So now this is going to show me, search, this is going to show me all of my documents, not my students' documents, not my friends' documents. These are my documents that I have recently edited. Okay, so if you don't like recent over here on the left, that's just a quick filter that shows any recent documents. If you want to be more specific, you're going to go up to this box at the top of Google Drive and pick your own filter for how you want to do it. So recent, that's my first go-to. I open up Google Drive, I click on recent. That allows me to really quickly pick up where I left off. I'm like, which folder did I save this in? Doesn't matter, because if I've recently edited it, I can usually find it under recent. So that's my first place to go. And then my second place to go is Shared With Me. This is anything where someone is collaborating with me. They have shared it with me. And again, this is a filter and not a folder. So you're not the owner. These are documents where you are not the owner. So let's go take a look at that. I'm going to click on shared with me. And so what you'll see is I have all of these files that were shared with me. And then when I look up here in the toolbar, I don't want to zoom in too much because I'll lose the toolbar. When I single click on a file in Google Drive, there's this whole toolbar up here at the top about that file. Here's the link to the file. I can share the file. I can view the file. do you notice it says remove and not delete? Because I'm not the owner, I can't delete it. I can just remove myself from it. That's all I can do. And then right next to it, it says, now this is new, add a shortcut, right? Someone else owns it. It's in their folder. You can't move it out of their folder. All you can do is say, well, I'd like to organize it in my Google Drive this way. And the owner's like, but I don't want to organize it that way. Fine. Just make it a shortcut. You can organize it however you want. It does not affect other people. But it essentially acts the same way as if you would put it into that folder in many respects. So shared with me. So Kirk, you say to me, Alice, I shared a document with you. I don't go check my email. Although when you share a document with me, it does send me an email letting me know that you've shared it usually by default. You can turn that off. And so I just click on share with me. It's right there and we start collaborating instantly. You don't have to send me a link. You don't have to do anything. If I just know that you've shared something with me, I click on share with me and now we are working together very quickly, easily, and efficiently. So those are my two. I click on recent and then I click on share with me and I get to work. Okay, so now if you open up a Google Docs, a Google Sheets, a Google Slides, and even a Google Forms, Forms just has a menu structure that's a little bit different. You go up to the File menu. You can choose to make a copy. You can make a copy. So if I share something with you, and I do this a lot where I tweet out, hey, I made this directions document for my students, and you're like, this is pretty great, but I'd like it to say these different things or put them in my own Google Classroom. Don't ask me for permission to the document. Don't ask me for that. You don't need to. You can just go file and make a copy. You make a copy. Now you're the owner of it. You can do with it whatever you want. So file, make a copy, I think is a really important skill to know as being a Google Apps user. And Kirk looks like he's very enthusiastic to agree with me that this makes the list of what are the first things you need to know being a Google Apps user. Make a copy. With that being said, now that we've done several of them, this is a Google form. I'm going to copy the link to this Google form and put it in the chat. What have I been leaving off? What do you all in this webinar right now say like, okay, Alice, these are great. And I agree with you on the file, make a copy. That's essential for people to know. The share button is more important. First we collaborate and then we can make copies. But what am I leaving off here? What do you think a brand new user should know? So if you could fill it into that link, I will go over those at the end. Now, stop. This is the paradigm shift. We don't make copies. We do not make copies in Google Apps. Obviously, there's exceptions. And I just gave you one. When I share something out on Twitter and you want to like modify it and personalize it, well, we're not collaborating together. You teach your own classes. I teach my own classes. We're going to do things a little differently sometimes. And in that case, yeah, you should file, make a copy. Now, of course, what you lose is if I update mine, you're not going to get any of the updates. When you make a copy is a copy and it's its own document. It's kind of like my children, they look like me, but gosh darn if I can't make them do things. Like they're going to be their own people, right? Good night, Lauren. Thanks for coming. So I want you to stop and think before you file, make a copy. Yes, you can make a copy, but don't. You should strongly hesitate. Like, do I really need to make a copy? The paradigm shift is using Google Apps. I do not have to make copies. I don't make copies. I keep using the same one. In fact, I've been using the same syllabus Google Doc for 10 years. So I create the document for fall. See, it's 2021 right now. So 2010, 11, right? 2011. I got fall 2011. And then in spring 2012, I edit that Google Doc so it now says spring 2012. I'm like, well, last semester I graded this way. This semester I'm going to grade this. I just edit the document. I don't make a copy. I don't make a copy. I just keep using the same one year after year after year. And the reason for that is copies kill collaboration. Copies kill collaboration. You should tweet that. So if we are collaborating on the syllabus, like you and I are teaching the same class, as soon as I make a copy, well, now there's two files. Which one are you supposed to be looking at? It's confusing. Copies kill collaboration. So as much as possible, I try not to copy. I just keep editing and updating the same document year after year after year. I don't copy them. And I think this is a basic concept I'm about to show you. It is essential for really understanding why I use Google Apps. What can you do with Google Apps? And that's version history. So in Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides, you go to the File menu and you choose Version History. Remember, there's no Save button. Google Apps does not have a Save button. It auto-saves every few edits. So you make some edits, it saves a version. You make some more edits, it saves a version. Kirk makes some edits on my document, it saves a version. Now, one time I shared a blog post, I typed it up in a Google Doc, and I shared it with a friend, like, can you just look this over? And apparently they just didn't like it at all and rewrote the whole thing with very bad grammar. And at first I'm like, what? Why would you do that? And I just wanted like some comments. Like, I didn't want you to rewrite the whole thing. This is no longer my words. And I'm like, whatever. And I go to the File menu and I go to the version history and I see the version history. And then you can see here on the right-hand side, this is what the version history looks like. On the right-hand side, you see it has an edit at 238. It has an edit at 239. It has another edit at 239. It has an edit at 241. It has an edit at 242. It has another edit at 242. You see it's saving frequently. And you click on any one of those edits. And in the upper left, it says restore this version. And so I can always wind it back. If I collaborate with someone, if I give somebody edit access, it is risk-free. It is risk-free. If I'm the owner, they cannot delete the file. They can only remove themselves. If I'm the owner and it doesn't matter if I'm the owner. If I go into the version history, it's going to show me who made the edit. So if I'm like, you messed this up, I look for the time before it got messed up that I last edited it, and I restore it back to the way that I thought it should look. And just restores it right back. So remember I told you I've been using the same Google Doc for 10 years. I've been using the same Google Doc for 10 years for my syllabus. And once in a while, someone will come back and say, hey, I was in your class 3 years ago. I need a copy of the syllabus for I'm transferring schools or whatever. No problem. I go into File. I go to Version History. I find the version. Now, if I need that to be an actual document, you can actually click on the 3 dots on the version and make a copy of that version. So that version gets pulled out and copied. If you need it, you can do that. Otherwise, I'll just restore the version, print it, and then I go back to the version history and I restore it back to the current version. And I just keep working within the same one document. I just manage the version history. Now, here's a fun fact. I am working on a Jamboard book, and I have a Google Drawings that I've been using to create backgrounds for the jams. Remember, that's the whiteboarding application. And so every time I make a background, I go File, let me back this up, Version History, and I name the current version. I name the current version. I do that frequently as I name the current version when I make a major edit. Apparently, there's a limit to the number of named versions you can have. But believe me, you need to have a lot. I have over 150 jams for this book, and I've been using it the whole time, and I only just now ran out of versions. So you will have more than you need, but I would get in the habit of doing File, Version History, name the current version so you know what major edit you made. My favorite name for the current version is Template. So before I share something with my students, I name the current version Template. That way, at the end of class, I go to the File menu, I go to Version History, and I choose See Version History. And then I find the version that says Template. I click on it on the right-hand side. Find the one that says Template. And then in the upper left, I look for that button that says restore this version, and I restore it back to the template before I collaborated with my students. So first period, we work together on a Google Slides, we share ideas, they add slides, we do stuff together. At the end of class, I go back to the version history, I put it back to the template the way it looked in the morning, and second period, we use the same one Google Slides. We just keep using the same Google Slides over and over again. And next year, I'll use the same slides I used last year. I just do not make copies. I think this is really important and hard to understand. Like, we're so used to, you know, if you've been an Office user, you make copies of your backups, right? You back up your backups. And this is not really paranoia. We've all lost files enough times that we know that we have to do that. And that just kind of goes away when you become a Google Apps user. Like, I don't make copies, and I just, the versions are automatically saved within the document that I don't need to file save as. That concept just literally dies. It just goes away, and I don't need it anymore. So I highly encourage you to be master of the version history. If we say, what's one thing I really need to know about using Google Apps? Well, if you've been using Office, you know a lot about using Google Apps. They're very similar. Google Docs is very similar to Word. Google Sheets is very similar to Excel. Google Slides is very similar to PowerPoint. So a lot of things you'll be able to navigate around fine. So the thing that you really need to focus on, like, I'm new to this. What do I need to know? Use the version history. So Kimberly says, how can I stop period 1 students from coming back to the document when another class is using it? If you shared it with all of your classes, you can't. Now, if I have Google Classroom, period 1, period 2, period 3, period 4, and I put this document to all the classes, I can remove access to period 1 going into the share settings. Period 1's actually shared as a group, and you can remove them or just switch them to viewers if you'd like. So at the end of first period, if you go into the assignment and switch it from anyone can view to can edit to view, then your first period now has view access. So that's...
Alice, can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
If the students, if like period 1, the students worked on a Google slide and the teacher wants to take that slide and have them continue to work on it, but then you have another group coming in period 3, what would you suggest to do?
In that case, I make a copy per group. That is where I do use the file, make a copy, and then I do 1 per group, per class, because in that instance, each class stands alone. It's something that we're going to work on over multiple class periods.
Okay.
All need their own, for sure. I probably do both of those equally often. I make 1 per class, or I just make 1 all day. So if I'm just doing something like formative assessment, I'm doing a lesson, I just want them to participate in my lesson, and I always want my students to be interactive with me. So here's my big paradigm shift, is just be brave. Whatever presentation you have, set it to let them edit it. Why not let them edit it? And then when I ask a question, they add a slide to my presentation, and we get to interact together on the same slides. It's a lot more participatory. And at the end of class, I just put it back to the template. Now, if I'm doing something like that, where I'm just doing a lesson and it's just for today and we're not really coming back to it, in that case, then I use the same one all day.
What would you suggest to teachers, Alice, that say, well, I use PowerPoint and Word because they're so much better and there's so much to it?
I don't think that there's so much better. I really love PowerPoint Slides Designer, I always said, but the collaboration is better in Google Apps. And I mean, if they want to use those tools, those are great tools too. Those are great tools too. Pick one. Either be a Microsoft user or a Google Apps user. You get really frustrated because you're in one and you know about this feature and the other one doesn't have it. I mean, Google Apps has things that Microsoft doesn't have and vice versa. So I choose to pick an ecosystem and live in it, just because otherwise I'm kind of grumpy and then trying to find a file. Oh, wait, it's over in my OneDrive. It's not in my Google Drive. And that's just frustrating.
How do you get a Microsoft Word document into a Google Drive, into a shared folder?
Absolutely. So I'm in my Drive, and here's a folder, whatever. I'm in a folder. And let's say I have a Word document. So I'm going to do word.microsoft.com. Nope. Word.office.com. Come on. Give me a Word doc. I gotta remember my username and password. Okay. Let me just see if I have a Word doc on my computer. .docx. I use Office on Microsoft Edge. I keep them separate. And on my Chrome,
Yeah.
I use Google Docs. When I'm using Office, I do it on Edge, and then so all my passwords and stuff are on that other account. Okay, what happened here? .docx. Come on. Find
There's
it
no
for me.
quick way to do it though, right? I mean,
There is. Yeah, no, this totally is. I just need to have one. I just don't have
Right.
one. I don't know that I have one. Should. Oh, here we go. Okay, here's my resume. It's a Word doc. And what you can't see, because I'm not sharing my whole screen, is that I've got my search window on my computer up.
right.
And I'm just going to, now this you can see, right? I
Yeah.
dragged the Word doc. I dragged the Word doc into Google Drive. That's it. I just dragged it in there.
That's
So you
it.
can do new file upload and go find all your Word docs and pull them in there. Or you can just drag it in from whatever window you got on your computer. You can literally just drag them into Drive.
You just drag the file in?
You just drag it in. Now it does leave it as a Word doc.
All right.
Okay, wait, this is gonna have my address on it. Let me find a different one. How about this one? We'll upload this one. Okay, and uploading. Okay, there it is. So you'll notice that this shows the W in the upper left-hand corner instead of the Google Docs icon. It is Word.
Yeah.
You'll see here it says .docx at
Yeah.
the title of the Google Doc name. The
Right.
toolbar looks a little bit different than
Uh-huh.
you see in Google Docs. So in that case, what you would want to do is file and save it as Google Docs to convert it. But here's why I use Google as my primary one is the word interoperability. That's a big word. Interoperability. So Google has a philosophy around interoperability. I can't open my Google Docs in Office. I cannot do that. I can't open my Office documents in Google. And so with this, it keeps it as a Word document. I can edit it. I can work with others on it. I can comment on it and leave it as the Word doc. Or if I want the full, because like I said, you'll notice that this is not the full toolbar. It's modified. If you want to use it as a Word doc and have Google Doc, and have full Google Doc capabilities, in that case, then you have to switch it to save as Google Docs. And it makes a copy and converts it over. And does a pretty good job.
So can I just hit file upload and put the file in there?
Yeah, just upload them.
That's what I told somebody to do, but they were like, that seems like a pain. I'm like, what?
You can upload an entire folder at a time. It's not that big a deal. I'm at fonts.google.com. So you remember our pattern for everything is .google.com, and the product here is fonts. So it's fonts.google.com, and they have 1,029 fonts. Google has over 1,000 free fonts. Take your pick. And so when I'm in a Google Doc, you'll see here in the toolbar that I have my fonts that I can use, and this says more fonts, and you can access all 1,000 of them, and you can add a new font if you want. All right, so question. When sharing the same document, restoring to the template version, can students see the work of the previous class going into version history? Yes. Yes. Gabby, if the version history is accessible to any editors of the document. Yes. They don't usually do it. So I haven't had much of a problem, but if it is a problem, then go ahead and make a copy with the second class, and if you don't want a version history that they could see. I just try to keep my drive cleaner. I don't want a bunch of copies of the same thing. I'm just like, it's all sitting in my Google Drive making a giant mess. Like, I'd like to have one file. That sounds much better. That's my preference. So version history, be a user of version history. I have a whole webinar on version history. I'll try and dig that up and send that out to you guys this week. Version history. is a key and essential way to use Google Apps. You need to be a version history user. And by the way, there is no version history in Google Forms. And Kristen, do not ask me when it will come. I do not know. And as far as to be honest, normally I wouldn't tell you whether I did or didn't know. But
Exactly.
I literally do not know that they are working on it. As far as I know, they're not working on it. But I do know that they are working on it for Jamboard. I just don't know when Jamboard will release it.
Cool.
The only reason I can share with you that they are working on it for Jamboard is because somebody accidentally released it. They're like, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. They turned it on when it wasn't supposed to be. So we know they're working on it. Now, when do they finish?
That's going to be nice.
Who knows when they finish it? You know, the problem is when you get a bug, sometimes you just can't get this thing to work, and you work on it, and you think like, I'm going to have this fixed this week, and then it's 2 years later, and you still haven't figured out how to fix it. So they just don't give you timelines. Just not going to get one.
I hear you.
Who's ever told me, hey, we're having this feature come out in the fall or whatever, I say 50-50 on that. They would like it to come out then. They'd like to. But if it's not working, it ain't working. And they're going to wait till it works. So there we go. That's the end of what I have pre-prepared, which I thought I had 30 minutes worth, and I sure enough had 90 minutes worth. But what I had given you the opportunity to do is to fill out my Google form, and then let's take a look at what you had. I'm going to refresh this. So this one I actually added is you can add a spreadsheet to a Google form by clicking on the responses tab. To me, this is a basic thing to know, is that when you make Google Forms, you see up here, it says questions and responses. And when you click on responses, it has a spreadsheet icon that it copies your form responses into a spreadsheet, which makes it a lot easier to read all of the responses. So that's one of my basic tips. Gabby, thank you. She says sharing options for creating a new document, spreadsheet, or form. And I think I covered that. Yes? I agree. Knowing how to share is essential. And so we did go over those. This is the edit version of my Google Slides, and I've been showing you the presentation view. So you click on the share button in the corner, and then you've got the sharing dialog box that lets me share with individuals or share more generically with the link where it says get link. Thank you. Docs, slides, and Drive. I covered those. How to use slides and sheets. Michelle, that's a great tip. I'm just getting you started with using it. So slides and sheets by themselves are their own workshop. So how to use them is to just start going to Google Drive. And in Google Drive, you choose new, and you choose new slides, or you choose new sheets. And it's going to create a new one for you. So thank you for that. Forms. You know, I only have limited time. And we did a whole webinar recently on the basics of using Google Forms. But in Google Drive, you go to the new button and you click on Google Forms, and that gets you started. Forms is a little bit more complicated than doc sheets and slides, just in the sense that, well, first of all, there's no version history. What? I know, it's bananas. So there's no version history. So if whoever's editing the form with you messes it up, it really literally messes it up. So be real careful about sharing forms with edit access. The other thing that makes it complicated is you have the edit side of the Google form, and you have the screen where people fill it out. And those two links are not the same. So those are, thank you, Kirk. Kirk says that my forms webinar was amazing. So I'm glad that that was helpful. And that is, of course, available on YouTube for anyone who would like to check it out. So forms is awesome. Use it. That's what we're going to start with today for the basic. Is start considering that you'd like to use forms. Tools on the toolbar. Kimberly, I hope I covered at least some of them. I did them and I focused on Drive today. I think that's really the heart of where we get started as a Google Apps user. Google Slides. Thank you, Kimberly. Great, easy set of tools to work and collaborate. And that's really the key word there, right? Collaborate. Put my mindset around collaborating. And even if I'm collaborating with myself, I collaborate with myself by being on my phone and my computer at the same time, or I just leave and I don't save it. I don't close it. I'm in the middle of a sentence. I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to go pick up my kids, and I go pick them up. and I don't lose my work, and I can just like, oh, finish this in the car while someone else is driving, you know? Easy. Sharing documents, I got that one. How do I get to? Kirk, did I cover that one?
Yes. So right before before you started recording, I put in the chat, could we ask questions as if we were teaching a certain grade level? So this would be like a kindergarten, first grader, something that I might teach.
No, I teach high school. I teach high school, and you're not born knowing how to use Google Apps, Kirk. You're definitely not born knowing how to collaborate politely. And we got to teach them that. We got to teach them that no matter the age. I don't assume anyone that I work with knows how to share a document. I mean, again, these are for anyone who is an adult. They literally would not have learned it in school because it didn't exist, and unless you're a new adult. Other than that, even if you did use it in school, who knows at what capacity you used it. So whenever I interact with anyone, I would not assume that they know the basics.
And so in the basics, usually in tech practice, there's multiple ways to do the same thing. So how do you phrase that to new users? Like, this is my favorite way. I use the phrase, my brain understands it better this way, but I can show you the second way, the third way.
I would think, Kirk, if I'm showing somebody who's really new to Google Apps, like they really need the basics, I would stick to one way. And if they are struggling or you're noticing that their workflows are not as efficient, I mean, that's good for a follow-up, right? And like, here's another way you could do the same thing. But
okay. I can agree with that if I had the students all day by myself, but if I share students and a different teacher that they encounter gets to Google Docs in a different way, then yeah. Okay.
Great. I'm not shying away. I mean, I showed you multiple ways. I said I go to Drive and I make my documents in Drive, but I also like to go to docs.google.com, slides.google.com, sheets.google.com. Now, my reasoning for that was not to give you another way. Like, let's just start with Drive, right? Let's get Drive down. Let's feel good about that. And then we can access other things. My learning objective on that one was that you understand the patterns. If you know the product name, then you can get there quickly. Take the product name, put .google.com, boom, lots of Google products. Kimberly, keeping Drive organized is not necessary. Did I say that? Because the search features in Google Drive are so good. Originally, the engineers at Google didn't want to even have folders. They resisted this. They're like, you don't use folders as a Google Drive user. That's back in the day. They've backed off on that just because you could search and find them. So folders are really, like I said, they're a constraint of our mind. They don't really exist. It really just labels them. And when you click on the folder, it really just filters for all the documents that are like-minded, so to speak, that are grouped together by this folder label. But I think we all use folders, and I doubt you would find hardly anyone who doesn't use them. It's a good idea. Like, here's all my stuff for first period. Why wouldn't I want to do that? And so, obviously having some sort of a system up front is helpful, but you can still find your stuff even if you don't organize it. Yes, I have a hot mess folder as I demonstrated in here. So if your Google Drive is a hot mess, I create a folder and call it hot mess, and I just drag everything into the folder. I just move it into the folder, and then I start organizing things as I use them. Like, well, I guess I used this file. I guess I should organize it somewhere. And hindsight is 20/20. Oh, Kirk, what a great question. How do you name a file? Super. Okay, so I'm in this Google Doc. So I've changed the font on. And in the upper left-hand corner, it says Untitled Document. Untitled Document. Now, if this was a slides, it would say Untitled Presentation. Or whatever the product is, right? And I just click on there. Now you'll notice it is actually, it named it right now. So if I'm on Google Slides, whatever is written in the title box on the first slide, it defaults to that name. In a Google Doc, whatever's written on the first line, it defaults to that name. But you'll notice it's all highlighted. So this is just kind of a personal pet peeve of mine. I think we should teach people this. You don't have to use the backspace key. If it's highlighted, you can just type and it deletes whatever's highlighted. So if it's highlighted, don't push the delete key. You don't need to. It's one extra stroke. I mean, you can if you really want to, but it's unnecessary. Right? And I just push enter. And it's saved. It's saved in Google Drive. I don't have to do anything else. And if you want to, you can click on this folder icon and organize it in Google Drive and pick a folder in Google Drive. And you'll see that my document is private. It has that padlock on it, which is what I was talking about. It is by default. And when I click on it, I'm going to get this box that pops up to let me put in the names of who I want to collaborate with. Okay, thank you. Yes, I just click up there and I can just rename it that way. I mean, you can use the file menu and choose rename. See, Kurt, I just showed you a second way to do it. But I almost exclusively just click in the upper left and name it. Okay, where's my file stored? We definitely covered that. It's Google Drive. We did not get to Gmail, Kimberly, and you're right. I would think that Gmail would be a basic of Google Apps. And I'm going to make a big leap here in saying that because it's 2021, that while I would have spent ordinarily a lot of time on Gmail 10 years ago, I don't think I need to spend very much time on it at all. And in fact, I think 0, because we're really talking about doc sheet slides as opposed to email. Because at this point, email is so ubiquitous. Everyone uses email. It's not something new to really anybody, unless you just got born yesterday, which some people were. Saw some births on Facebook. It's always fun to see baby pictures. How do I get a file I started last week? I showed that, right? We go to the recent on the left-hand side. If you go up to Untitled, at the very top of Google Drive, you type in Untitled, all of your documents come up. So let's do that and type in Untitled.
So right there, you've used the word filter, not sorting or searching. So is there an official vocabulary for looking for a file?
Searching is a filter. I filtered it, right? I filtered it for all of my documents. And if I click on the little filter arrow, you'll see that it has the words Untitled, like it created the filter for me. Even though I am searching, I search by creating a filter. It doesn't matter what word you use, it doesn't.
Okay.
Okay, so this is not beginner. This is not beginner, but since you asked, I find the file, I single click on it, and I'm going to push P for preview. Not beginner. Oh, what is this? This is my badges. Escape. Ready? And I push N for rename.
It's just the letter, or do you have to hold down Control or Command or?
That's the letter, right? Okay, so I single click on the file. P to preview.
Oh.
P to preview. Escape. N to rename. I can name it. Now, if you're new, I wouldn't do the P in the end, but I know everyone in this room right now is not a new user. So I thought you might enjoy a little tip. So if you are a new user, remember what I told you? Right click. And if you right click on the file, that gives you all the same options. I can preview, that's the first one, and I can rename, that's down here in the middle. So you don't need to know the keyboard shortcuts, but I think they're kind of fun. So that's for you guys, that's a bonus. Definitely not a beginner tip, but a fun one. Oh, yes, Gabby, that is a great tip. I don't know if that's a beginner tip. I'm going to point it out because one of the things that you can do when you're beginning Google Docs, and I think if we were to get this down to the beginning Google Docs, beginning Google Slides, those are their own webinars all in themselves. When I highlight some text in a Google Doc, you see over here on the right-hand side, this is new, brand new. It gives me these two icons. So the first one lets me make a comment, so I can comment on it. Give them a note, or I switch to suggestion mode so that when I'm typing, it puts it in as a suggestion that someone has to approve. If you're collaborating with somebody, it is rude to delete their words. So if I want to edit someone else's words, I will, in the doc, you can just highlight it, Oops. Let me go. I'm already in suggestion mode. See, not a beginner tip. When I highlight it, it gives me the option to switch to suggestion mode. So I would disagree that being a beginner tip, but it's certainly a good one. Okay, it looks like all I have. Any last questions that you think beginners would want to know? All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.